presentations and input, and I would like to invite session 1 presenters as well as keynote speaker Myung Hee again on stage with me for the discussion. Just a little check. Could you let me know if there's any questions in the chat for the digital participants? Just give me some sign if there are any. Thank you. I will just arrange for the translation to be in my ear as well. So again, thank you for the presentations. I think we had a big variety of different approaches to expand borders, to cross borders, to learn how crossing border influences art and culture in the meantime. And I think it's very interesting also the fact of that this movement to lean into the boundaries and test them and see what the results will be. And so if I may, I would just open in a bit for questions from the audience, but if I may ask the first question. I was wondering, because you are all educators, lecturers, and I was wondering, when you teach, how do your students express a need for leaning into these artistic boundaries? Do you have any experience that you'd like to share with us on how the next generation, because we were also talking about the future and overcoming the human on stage, kind of in the post-human setting in puppetry, and so I wondered, how does the next generation handle this leaning, stretching boundaries, crossing borders? Anyone wants to take a word?
일단 제 생각에는 젊은 배우들 또 움직임을 중요하게 생각하는 배우들과 함께 많이 작업하시는 이두성 선생님께서 조금 많은 사례들을 알고 계시지 않을까 생각합니다. 왜냐하면 젊은 세대들에게는 확실히 각 예술관의 어떤 장르의 경계나 이런 것들이 확실히 점점 더 무너지고 있는 게 너무 당연한 현상이기 때문이죠. 그렇기 때문에 그런 세대들과 함께 많이 작업하시는 이두성 선생님께서 뭔가 이야기가 먼저 좀 있지 않을까요?
저는 그냥 학생들한테 얘기할 때 제 얘기를 많이 하는데요. 어떤 이론이나 그런 것보다 경험한 거를 나누고 싶어 합니다. 이렇게 정확하게 경계가 구분된 거는 20세기에 한 100년, 200년밖에 안 됐다고 생각해요. 오래 전이나 또 20세기 이후 포스트 모던부터는 다 융합되고 서로 협력하면서 나아가는 그런 거라고 생각을 들고요. 안타까운 거는 학생들, 특히 연기를 공부하겠다고 하는 학생들이 우울증이 요즘 너무 많아서 또 20, 30대 여학생들이 우린 대한민국이 자살률이 1위를 다투는데 그 중에서도 여학생의 비율이 상당히 높아요. 근데 그렇게 된 이유는 자본주의가 몸을 너무 상업화하고 어떤 틀에 맞추는 거에도 영향을 주지 않았을까? 그런 생각을 하는데요. 예술도 너무나 세분화하면서 거기에 대한 특성을 강조했기 때문에 말세를 말해서는 계속 이게 마인입니다. 이거와 경계가 이렇습니다. 라고 구분했지만 오히려 그 구분하려고 했던 것 자체가 너무나 무용, 인형과 연극과 상호 연관성이 있기 때문에 그걸 애써 구분하려고 했던 거라고 생각이 들어서 가장 한계점이 가장 연결되는 점이 아닐까? 그런 식으로 얘기를 학생들이랑 나누고 있고요. 미국의 어느 정신병원의 입구에 그렇게 써 있다고 그래요. 그 병원은 다들 환자들한테 예술가라고 서로가 얘기를 하고 있고요. 우리는 모두 부서졌고 빛은 그 틈으로 들어온다. We are broken, that's how the light gets in. 그런 말이 있는데 그 모든 장르의 부서진 틈에 같이 연결점이 있지 않을까 그렇게 생각하고 있습니다. 아이고 말이 너무 길었습니다.
이두성 선생님께 제가 갑자기 말씀을 이렇게 딱 넘겨서 저도 이제 저는 주로 그 한국 연극의 그 연출가들, 젊은 연출가들과 이제 많이 작업을 하거나 같이 접촉할 일들이 많이 있는데요. 이제 연출가들 같은 경우에는 이제 그런 것들을 혼란을 많이 느낍니다. 특히 야외에서 공연을 하는 거리 예술이라든지 장소 특정적인 퍼포먼스를 할 경우에 이것은 연극이라고 본인들은 생각을 하는데요. 또 한국 연극의 학제라든지 어떤 지원 제도들은 또 그들을 다원예술이라고 분류를 하기도 하고 또 그러면은 연극과 다원예술의 경계는 무엇인지 이제 특히 콘셉트 위주로 작업을 하는 연출가들 같은 경우에 또 이런 것들에 대해서 그 경계에 대해서 좀 궁금해하고 앞으로 점점 더 이것은 허물어지지 않을까 이렇게 생각을 하는데 또 현실에서는 그것들이 그들의 작업이나 상상력을 제한하는 이런 역할들을 하고요. 이제 그런 것들의 벽에 부딪히는 경우들을 많이들 보고 있습니다. 근데 이 경계에 너무 서 있는 작업들이 지금 너무 많아요. 렉처 퍼포먼스라든지 방송, 사이트 스페시픽 공연, 이런 애들은 사실 연극이라고 저는 생각을 하지만 또 다른 또 서현 선생님들 같은 경우는 다른 분들 같은 경우는 어떤 합의된 기준은 또 다르고요. 네, 이런 얘기들 잠깐 이야기 던져봅니다.
Although my presentation was about the history of the traditional puppetry, because one of my interests is tracing the history of traditional Iranian puppetry, but I'm working with the students at the university with contemporary puppetry and contemporary theater. And when we were studying, it was always at university. It was always this question: is this puppetry? No, it's not puppetry because there is no puppet in this show. And it was, very, restricted opinion about what is puppetry and what is not puppetry. But now it's, I think it's not, these questions are not the matter because I always tell my students that please don't ask this question because it's theater. And we all use puppets, figures and objects when we think that they can help us to express better. They are sort of means of expressions to express better, to perform better. They are like mediums, some miracles between us as performers and the audience. And now I think for this current generation and maybe next generation, there is no boundaries between these sort of things. That when we were studying theater, it was very restricted. This is, for example, pantomime, this is puppetry, this is human theater, and of course, maybe these changes happen in different parts of the world, in different times. But now I think is really good era for this. Yeah, no boundaries.
About education or passing on tradition, passing on to new generations. As for current years, I think it's a bit challenging subject because when we look at the historical records, like all these old reviews, every decade you have this discussion about masters and also intellectuals. Karagöz is dead. Let's move on. Or Karagöz shall not die. It cannot die. We have to kind of enhance it. But when we go back before UNESCO was founded, or the idea of tradition, because in the 19th century they were not practicing tradition, they were practicing a daily puppet performance. But today, in the 21st century, tradition has its own borders, limits. Of course, it depends on the institution, the academic, the master who defines it. You cannot paint it like this. It cannot have blue on it. Or you cannot play display because it's not a traditional scenario. But when we look at Karagöz's history, there are no borders. Experimental, that's how it survived till today. So people try to turn their three dimensional puppets into two ones, or transfer other stories into their screen. So there weren't any borders. But in 21st century, especially about teaching Karagöz as tradition or cultural heritage, is a bit tricky. Because you kind of get, okay, can I sing this song? Can I sing Britney Spears when I'm opening the... you had better not. But you know, there are no strict regulations, of course. You can do whatever you want. But then the question comes, but is this Karagöz, or is this just a two-dimensional theater played behind a screen? So the definition is defined by borders, how we limit tradition or the meaning of puppetry. So it's a bit complicated about teaching it to new generations. Tricky.
Thank you. I think this is. Hello. Thank you. I think this is where our first session comes together as well as like the stepping over these kind of boundaries and looking into the history and seeing how crossing borders influence in many different levels and how it's going to be in the future. Crossing the border of AI, of robotics, of the artificial human, of the post-human, like crossing even like the human body in space and moving on to this. I think this is a very interesting red thread that I can spot here. Thank you. I want to open now to the audience. Are there any questions, any comments? David.
Yeah, Salman, the question is to you.
Wait, there's a microphone coming for you so that online people can also hear you.
Salman, the question is to you. Thank you for the presentation. But most of puppeteers, practicing puppeteers, are not necessarily the best researchers. And where does white Orientalism come into this? Because when you mentioned Omar Khayyam, I think these were Edward Fitzgerald's translations. Or I come to that when we were doing the Rumi performance, we couldn't read the original text and we used mostly Coleman Barks. And that was again considered as transliterated 2-3 times. So what is the original metaphor in that language, Farsi or whatever? This is what is important, and how is it then taken over by white Britishers and translated again? And then that becomes false assumptions at times because it's stamped as the truth. That's my question.
Yeah, thank you, Daddy. Yes, it's very important. Although the Fitzgerald's translation is, I think, very one of the best translations of Omar Khayyam, but I can tell you the Persian poem that این چرخ فلک مادر حیرانی فانوس خیال از او مثالی دانی. فانوس خیال is exactly the magic lantern. It's really a good translation of this. And Omar Khayyam and also other poets has many poems with these things. With these words. For example, khiyal or khayal, and also perde means curtain or screen, saye, that means shadow, and the one who play with these shadows. These are the exact translation of the words. For example, when we have a Rubai from Khayyam, that he uses exactly all the parts of one Khayme Shahbazi show as a metaphor in his poem. We are puppets, and this universe is a puppeteer. It's the exact translation of these words. Naga's also here and can say something if you want to. Yes, thank you.
Guys, want to add? No. Are there further questions? Okay, there will be a microphone coming to you. Yes.
My question is pretty simple. It is about something to do with the center of gravity. One of the things working in puppetry, it moves the center out of view. At certain times it's heavily in the puppet, but it's really someplace in between, which makes puppeteers rather thoughtful people. So I was wondering, in very simple terms, for the junk cart woman, is that a real robot? What is the relationship between the manipulator, or does it just run down the street on its own? Sort of like the Teslas or the automatic cars. They're doing now. And with the Cinderella and the skeleton, I wonder, given some of these words, how do you work that into your actual show to explain it, to deal with the criticism that may come out in terms of it. So, thank you.
제가 먼저 할까요? 예. 그 자동인형의 개념은 이전부터 인형 작업자들 같은 경우에는 제가 알기로는 많이들 도전을 하고 시도하고 싶어 하는 것으로 알고 있습니다. 그러니까 인형을 이제 기계 태엽 자동 장치가 아니라 어떤 자가 발전으로 이제 스스로 움직이게 하는 인형이죠. 그래서 실제로 그 작업자께서는 당연히 그 인형 고물술의 그 할머니를 만들기 이전에 여러 자동 인형들을 실험들을 하셔서 그 할머니까지 만들었고요. 그래서 사람들은 이제 그것이 인형인지 아닌지에 대해서 초창기에는 조금 논란이 있었던 것으로 알고 있는데요. 왜냐하면 이것을 그럼 인형극으로 불러야 할지 로봇이라고 얘기하기에는 약간 로봇은 또 제가 알기로는 이제 인공지능과도 결합되어서 더 다른 차원의 것들로 발전되어 가는 것으로 이미 알고 있거든요. 그래서 이것은 또 로봇이라고 이야기하기에는 조금 더 기초적인 단계의 아주 단순한 동작을 반복하는 이런 자동 인형 기계라고 이제 표현을 하는 게 더 좋을 것 같은데요. 그래서 초창기에 나왔을 때는 조금 논란이 있었지만 곧 그 인공지능의 그 발달과 더불어서 이제 전 세계적으로 로봇이 굉장히 상용화되어 있고 지금 로봇은 대형 쇼핑몰에서도 팔고 있습니다. 그래서 굉장히 일상화되고 있다고도 이야기할 수 있는데요. 기계에 대한 어떤 생각들이요. 그렇게 사람들이 친숙해져서인지 이 할머니, 그러니까 자동 인형 그 로봇 기계 할머니는 굉장히 그 퍼포먼스를 거듭할수록 초창기에는 처음에는 약간 거부감이 있었지만 점점 더 인기가 많이 올라간 것으로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 아까 사진에서도 보셨다시피 사람들이 굉장히 적극적으로 관객들이 리액션을 하면서 같이 그 고물이나 이런 걸 주워드리고 이제 그런 모습들을 연출을 했고요. 야외 퍼포먼스에서요. 근데 마찬가지로 그런 행위들을 하고 또 그렇게 옆에서 도와주는 사람들을 보는 그 관객들의 입장은 좀 복잡합니다. 왜냐하면 실제 그 한국 사회에서의 고물과 그런 걸 줍는 그 빈민 노인들에 대해서는 사실 실제 사람들에 대해서는 그렇게 관심을 기울이지 않거든요. 우리 사람들이. 그래서 그런데 로봇 인형에 대해서는 그렇게 관심을 기울이는 이 어떤 그런 이중성에 대해서 이제 느끼게 되는 거죠. 행위를 하는 사람이거나 아니면 그것을 보는 사람이거나 그런 이중적인 게 느껴지는 퍼포먼스로서 여러 축제에 초청이 되고 이제 인기를 많이 얻은 것으로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 이 자리를 빌어서 좀 소개를 하고 싶었습니다. 네.
And they really like to play, but thinking of the whole dance, the impact they had, like all these magic lantern shows, ballerinas flying, and the Cinderella's beautiful dress, lifelike image. How could I use this on Karago's screen so that the audience knows that what they are watching is incredibly beautiful? So it was challenging because even when designing these skeletons, which is really this famous puppet for about 50 years, should it have a profile view like the traditional ones? But then it's not scary enough. So I really wanted to scare the audience. So I had like two eyes coming, and then I was always checking to see if it's scary enough. And then with the Cinderella, I couldn't find a specific image of Cinderella used in Holden's plays in the archives. So that Cinderella is more like a cartoon Cinderella, which the new generation will be familiar with, I thought. And I used lots of music, because there shouldn't be any words, not because it's kind of a quasi-pantomime, but because I didn't want to. I just want them to be in the play as a variety act, like the dancing. But what happened in the second performance, my music didn't work. So the ballerina was still dancing, and I made Hacivat and Karagöz talk behind. Oh, do you see how beautiful it is? Yes, I know, it's a very famous story, and Mr. Holden is very good at it. I was sweating without the music, but still the audience liked it, because they're not treated like the traditional figures in Karagöz plays. So yeah, I mean, for some stories like the skeleton, it was easy to reconstruct. But with the Cinderella, because you have to imagine the 19th century audience, they are familiar with the magic lantern style performances, but not the three-dimensional mannequins flying in a theater building. So I wanted to carry this effect on in the Karagöz play. So what I did was I also used other forms of traditional puppets as a part of the story. Okay, the Cinderella gets lost, but let's find other puppets. The other traditional puppets found by Karagöz. They construct their own Cinderella. But yeah, it was challenging, but also it also made me realize the opportunities that what you can do on Karagöz's stage with just music, with sudden entrances of the puppets, or watching, showing the puppet above the curtain to the audience, skeleton to the children especially, when they're too scared to see, no, this is just a puppet, don't be scared. So yeah, that was the, if I'm answering your question, I might be a bit lost with Cinderella.